Controversial take. This ranking won't be accounting for the later seasons of the show since no good characters were added and everyone essentially deteriorates from how horrendous the writing became. Or it won't be considering the bad directions David and Dan took the characters, and will mainly be looking at the best and good qualities our characters possess. Also, this will be the most divisive ranking since literally anyone on this list is probably someone's favorite, so keep in mind this is my opinion. Number 20. Robb Stark. Just because I'm putting Robb Stark at number 20 doesn't make him a bad character. That just means there are dozens of good characters in the show and cramping them into 20 is difficult. For Robb Stark, I think he doesn't live up to his full potential in the show because David and Dan didn't give him a lot of priority. As I said in my analysis on season 2, most of his battle conflicts fall into the background, and his romantic story with Talisa takes center stage. Which, on its own is fine, but arguably the Battle of the Five Kings should be getting more attention. I think in Season 3 we get a much better balance of the battle and his romance considering that he marries Talisa at the end of Season 2. So we get more conflict, like a lot of discourse amongst his officers, people going against his orders and him having to execute people, and looking for forgiveness from the Freys. Season 3 Robb Stark is practically perfect, and I think if he got more of the spotlight then he'd be higher on my list. Number 19. Eddard Stark. So there are a few characters on this list that are only in one season, and it's hard to quantify their placement because they have a limited amount of time. But from this short time, I think Ned Stark still cements himself as being a great character. His honorable demeanor is perfectly contrasted against the corrupt and slimy members of the small council. Through his perspective, we see how cruel the world of Game of Thrones is, and it makes it equally as tragic when that world swallows him whole and takes his life. I also love the critical choice he has to make to leave behind his perfect life in Winterfell with his family to try and save his best friend Robert since he just found out that Jon Arryn was killed. It imbues his character with an engaging objective and we instantly latch onto him as we travel through King's Landing, which is why it's so heartbreaking when he dies since we lost our main POV protagonist. The main reason he isn't higher is because of the unfortunate one season limit. Number 18. Catelyn Stark. It may seem a bit controversial to be putting Catelyn over Ned and Robb, but I think she's much more of a complex character. She's generally submerged in internal conflict that makes her feel like one of the most fully realized characters. So many issues bubbling under the surface, like her hatred towards Jon Snow, and how that illustrates her emphasis on family, and choosing to let Jaime go for the long shot of getting her daughters back. All of her major decisions drastically change the story, and they are all justified from her own perspective of a loving mother. There's also so much nuance in her performance. Any scene in which Michelle Farley has some great material to sink her teeth into, she knocks it out of the park. In essence, that's why The Red Wedding is so damn impactful. The acting alone is a killer performance that leaves everyone speechless. And that's not even mentioning some of her more low-key scenes like her confession of not being able to love Jon Snow after promising she'd try her best. The emotional depth of Catelyn is crazy, and I genuinely don't know why people dislike her. Although personally I wouldn't put her much higher because I think she shines in one area while other characters are like multifaceted tools with so many great aspects to be enjoyed. Number 17. Stannis Baratheon. Now, relax. I know it's a crime to some of you that I'm putting the almighty Stannis the goddamn Manus at number 17, but personally, I prefer the more lively characters. Because Stannis most of the time is brooding, and to me that can become a bit dull at times. However, Stannis in Season 2 was practically perfect. The cold, calculating general driven by a destiny that he wholly believes in makes for an engaging character. Even when Stannis is losing, he's still getting good dialogue scenes where he's questioning Melisandre and whether he's truly worthy. The angel and devil of Davos and Melisandre pulling Stannis in differing directions also makes for an outstanding dynamic from how much conflict is being thrown around. And Stannis having to constantly make hard choices makes every scene even more tense. He's also constantly permeating a badass demeanor, and even when he's in a losing scenario, he still comes across as a hero. I fully respect Stannis, and if Season 3, 4, and 5 were able to reach the highs of Season 2 for him as a character, I would easily place him in my top 10. Number 16. Robert Baratheon. I love how Bobby B can easily snatch a spot on my list with having such a small amount of screen time. The drunken meme dad bod aura of Bobby B is unmatched by any character in Game of Thrones. I would drop anything if this god of a human descended down upon my plane of existence and asked to come chill with him. And not only is Robert Baratheon a gem of comedy and memes, He's also a character with a shocking amount of depth due to the amount of history that is tied to him. Robert can just be telling war stories for an entire episode and I'd be perfectly satisfied. On top of his relationship dynamic with Cersei and how tragic it was for her that Robert's lust for Lyanna ruined everything. An overall great character study of a warrior way past their prime and seeing what happens to a character like that as they brutally self-destruct with rampant usage of alcohol, whores, and memes. Number 15. Bronn. Bronn is an interesting case because he initially started out number 11 on my list, and I've been slowly lowering him. And that's because, in comparison to most of the other characters ahead of him, he's not as complex. Bronn is a simple character who has very clear and cut objectives and ideals. That obviously doesn't make him bad, but in comparison to other colorful characters like Varys and Littlefinger, he can't compete in my opinion. However, his capabilities for being an amazing duo partner to Tyrion and Jaime, and how much humor pours out between them, makes him an extremely fun character. So much of Game of Thrones' best humor comes from Bronn or from him egging on Tyrion and messing with him. Every one of his scenes in the first few seasons are practically perfect for what they are. Fun comedic relief that breathes fresh air into the dark world of Game of Thrones. And he also doesn't only add humor, but he injects a surprising amount of wisdom from his extensive experience as a sellsword, along with offering an interesting juxtaposition of someone who fights without honor, clashing with people who do. It makes almost every encounter he has with other characters pretty unique. Number 14. Oberyn Martell. This is so sad. I would absolutely love to put Oberyn much higher, but since he's only in season 4, I can't really put him that high. That being said, for the few scenes he does have, they are all easily S tier. From his perfect introduction setting up his relationship to the Lannisters, how badass he is, and him still respecting Tyrion while he goes on in detail about how much he loathes his house, to the magnificent monologue he gives Tyrion and his crazy fight that ends in utter tragedy that leaves everyone in crippling shock. This is a character that quickly comes in and leaves an outstanding impression for the little amount of screen time he had. He's quick-witted and charming, and even Oberyn Martell can rival Tywin Lannister in a dialogue scene. The sinister smiles they give each other is cute as hell. Oberyn is arguably the most likable character in the show, and it's a crime that George R. R. Martin killed him so early. It's a shame that we're getting numerous spin-off shows from Game of Thrones, but we aren't getting an Oberyn spin-off. Come on, Pedro is still in his prime. Number 13. Ramsay Bolton. His unpredictable nature makes him extremely menacing, and the amount of fear he strikes into his neighboring characters makes us shudder in terror. Iwan Rheon does a perfect job encapsulating Ramsay for how much of a twisted psychopath he is. The only reason I wouldn't put him a bit higher is because the show rarely delves into why Ramsay turned out to be so crazy. We have one scene where he talks about his mother briefly, and up until season 6, where his position is challenged by Roos's new son, we never really get any conflict between him and Roose. So it's a bit of a mystery why Ramsay is such a disturbed character. Although, to a degree, it's fun to imagine how dark his backstory is, and the vagueness behind it can aid him in a way. Just in comparison to a fully fleshed out villain like Joffrey, I would put Ramsay under him. But I do think Iwan does some amazing legwork in his performance to make Ramsay such a crazy villain. And that paired with George R. R. Martin's diabolical writing makes for a great duo of a character. Number 12. Peter Baelish. The essence of what made season 1 of Game of Thrones so great. And seasons 2, 3, and 4 for that matter. The political and connivical nature of Littlefinger is very alluring and entrancing. We're always wondering and theorizing what he's up to, and trying to figure out what his motives are is so much fun. The twist of him lying to Ned throughout season 1 imbues every later scene with Littlefinger with an essence of doubt, because we are always unsure of whether he's lying or telling the truth. He's also a unique villain in that he's always in the background manipulating his story into different directions. From being the person that starts the war between the Lannisters and the Starks, to killing Lysa Arryn and successfully taking control of the Vale. Also, I think the secret sauce of Littlefinger is Aidan Gillen's incredible, raspy and grating voice. It gives his character a more creepy and unsettling demeanor, and it always sounds like he's 10 steps ahead of everyone. The amount of confidence exuding from Peter is honestly sexy, and I can't keep my eyes off him whenever he's in the room. Number 11. Varys. So Varys is very similar to Littlefinger in that they are both scheming, mysterious people who work behind the scenes to achieve their own objective. The main difference is that Varys is the good guy, or at least in the show. The primary reason I put him over Littlefinger is that His duo with Tyrion offers more in value than Peter's duo with Sansa. Tyrion and Varys' dialogue scenes offer up some magnificent lines and are a clear highlight in the first few seasons. Littlefinger peaks higher than Varys in some iconic moments, but Varys has a more consistent presence since Littlefinger's also traveling a lot and doing things in the background. From that alone, I think Varys has more to offer, and his backstory is also more intriguing. Because not only did a weird pedo cut off his privates for fun, but there's also a magical aspect tied to it in that when his privates were thrown into the fire, a voice called out, thus fueling Varys' hatred towards magic and making him a more detailed character. That, and also the balance of sinisterism and friendliness within Varys, makes him even more curious as we try to figure out what angle he's playing at. His ability to flip between those two states reminds us that he's still a force to be reckoned with, and makes me respect him even more. Number 10. Olenna Tyrell. You may think I'm crazy for putting Olenna Tyrell over so many iconic characters, but hear me out. This is a character that is old and is physically not intimidating, but she is still able to be one of the biggest badasses in Game of Thrones. She's written with a ferocious temperament and roasts everyone she comes across. Not only is her fierce and funny dialogue riveting, she's also a really smart character with heaps of wisdom thanks to how much experience she's gone through. You may think that Olenna talking about potential love interests would be boring, but from Olenna's fun perspective of knocking down and dismantling people with her quick wit makes the dialogue significantly better. And this applies to every dialogue scene she's in. The only time that she is matched is by Tywin Lannister, and even that scene was like a fun fight where the future of their houses were at stake. And as a side point, I'm not accounting for the later seasons, but Olenna is really one of the only characters that had a great scene, which was her confession to Jaime that she killed Joffrey. So not even David and Dan can ruin Olenna. Number 9. Joffrey Baratheon. I feel like most people would probably say that Joffrey is the best villain in the show, but I would argue that there's another main villain that's even better. Joffrey on his own is such an interesting case of, what if a child grows up into being the worst human being possible? That by itself is a great what if scenario character study, but also pairing that scenario with him becoming the king is a jackpot idea. It gives an evil character unlimited power and plays into the unpredictable menacing nature of a good villain because he can literally do anything. Listening to someone playing a song, adios tongue, hanging out with Sansa, time to shake up our relationship with a nice crossbow. Joffrey's spontaneous attitude and doing insane things on the fly makes him an infectious villain to watch. And it's all grounded because this is a spoiled child with an obscene amount of power. Since Joffrey's backstory is more cemented and fully realized in comparison to Ramsay, it makes his clash with family members even more tense and exciting. Like Tywin Lannister being one of the best, and Tyrion slapping him around never gets old. Number 8. Daenerys Targaryen. Dany isn't in the top 5? What? But Supercuts delight! She's a main character! Yes, but for most of Daenerys' scenes, she's generally dealing with the same conflict tied to her being a conqueror, and that can get repetitive when looking at her entire run. However, is her conqueror and upbringing character arc bad? No, not by any means. And it's extremely entertaining. Her turn from being suppressed and a scared child to a raging leader with heaps of power is a magnificent joyride. One of the most iconic set pieces in the whole show is Dany accumulating the Unsullied, and from then on, her story is intensely riveting as she rolls through cities and we get dopamine hit after dopamine hits. Also, in the rare cases where her battle-hardened facade is peeled back in a more dramatic scene like locking away her dragons in Ser Jorah's betrayal, I think it offers a much-needed dose of vulnerability. Although the most interesting part of her entire arc to me in concept is the Mad Queen arc, but I can't take that into account because it was butchered later on. So naturally, I'll put her under the other main characters a bit because of the unfortunate circumstance of one of the meatiest parts of her story taking place during season 8 and 7. And it also takes a couple seasons for her character to really pop off in comparison to Tyrion as an example, who is amazing right out of the gate. Number 7. Sandor Clegane. Sandor Clegane isn't just a one-trick funny dude who roasts people left and right, but he has a lot of trauma under his hard exterior shell, and once you get to know him, the Hound evolves into a more friendly puppy. This deconstruction is perfectly showcased between the pairing of Arya and the Hound, and their dialogue alone makes me love him to death. And this deconstruction works both ways in that the Hound also challenges some of Arya's ideals and outlooks, like what makes a good warrior and the harsh reality of the world. He becomes her guardian, and this deserter turned father is one of my favorite character arcs in the show. And I want to go back to him roasting people because he has a miraculous talent at utterly disintegrating people with just his usage of words. It makes him even more likable when he's out here rolling characters since he has no fear of death. But fire, that's scary as hell. And it's also ironic that this brute of a character is so scared of it. It makes his character even more vulnerable and real, not just an unstoppable force. Number 6. Jaime Lannister. This man is at the center stage of one of the best scenes in the whole show, where it's just a monologue about him revealing the truth of the Mad King and exposing how being a knight isn't black and white and is instead morally complicated. And throughout, it's so entrancing because we are unpacking the entirety to what makes this character operate. Everything is spilling out and it's beautiful. I am describing one scene out of a plethora, but this is the magnum opus that makes us love Jaime as a character. Before, he came across as an arrogant brat who thought he was always in the right. However, through this journey with Brienne, he learns what it takes to be an upstanding knight. George R. R. Martin turns a seemingly irredeemable killing machine into one of the most relatable characters. That feat alone is some outstanding writing. And Jaime is such a good character that he even survives in later seasons until obviously the one catastrophic line that ruins his character. Obviously though, I'm not taking that into account. The only reason why I wouldn't put him higher in my list was because he was kind of tied to a post for a whole season, and even then, there were still a couple great dialogue scenes while he was a prisoner. Number 5. Arya Stark. We made it to the top 5 and Arya is easily deserving. I love her adventurous and courageous attitude, which makes her seem even stronger when in the face of death. It's ironic how much bravery she has given her young age, which makes her even more commendable. Also, the overall concept of a highborn lady wanting to become a brilliant warrior is inherently really intriguing. And I think they fully execute on that fun premise by her joining the Faceless Assassins and also training under Syrio Forel. Her slowly becoming more and more powerful over the course of the series gives us a fun progression, and whenever she shows off her new abilities and does something for the first time, we become enthralled. That and 2 of her seasons are spent hanging out with the Hound, so she really has no downtime. And before that, she had a roller coaster of a ride through King's Landing for season 1, and season 2, she hung out with Tywin. Most characters at some point have a dull section in their story, but Arya's storyline is always delightful. Number 4. Cersei Lannister. Now this isn't the best villain, that is still yet to come. Cersei to me is a bit more of a protagonist who occasionally clashes with our main heroes. On the outside, she may come across as hostile, however on the inside, she's a loving mother who will do anything for her own children. Similar to Catelyn, although Cersei doesn't have a lot of honor to hold her back. This leads her to be more vicious, and seeing the lengths she goes to for her children is crazy. Lena Headey also thoroughly elevates the character with her superb acting, and seeing her hit her extremes is breathtaking. Her singular scene with the death of Joffrey was amazing, and I'm really surprised she didn't win any Emmys for the entirety of her run as Cersei. Not only is she great on her own, but she also shines in numerous character pairings. Whether she's clashing with Bobby B and Ned, having chill talks with Tyrion that exposes her backstory, her loving Jaime, her desperately trying to impress her father, and rolling any other miscellaneous character that crosses her path. Number 3. Jon Snow. Going into this list, I was going to shaft Jon because of how much the later seasons made me hate him, but after rewatching some of the earlier seasons, I've come to like him a lot more again, and was reminded about how he was actually a great character through the first half of the show. We don't just have the same repetitive dialogue, but a character that's drowning in so much conflict that tears them apart. Like his constant state of friction with Catelyn, him kind of being misled into thinking the Night's Watch was a great place, and realizing everyone there are criminals, changing his entire outlook on life when joining the Free Folk, and balancing helping them while simultaneously trying to protect his brothers from getting killed by the Free Folk. Jon Snow changes significantly throughout his journey. Like he's doing 180s in almost every season. Even through all this change, Jon is still anchored down by a strong honorable core that is inherited from Ned. So he's realistic while also having a dynamic and thrilling story. Not to mention that he led the episode The Watchers on the Wall, which is by far the best episode in the show where Jon is an almighty warrior. So not only is his character development really good, he's also a really good fighter and his fight scenes are really fun. Number 2. Tywin Lannister. This is my list, and I absolutely adore Tywin. I hope you're proud of me for refraining from putting him at number 1. Charles Dance perfectly sinks into the character of Tywin. His voice is like smooth jazz that melts my insides. The way he deals with characters and destroys people in such an easy manner makes me gush with joy. The scene in which he demolishes Joffrey by sending him to bed shows how much of an alpha god he is. Tywin is the best villain in the show. Not because of his unpredictable or scary manner, but because of how much power the single man has. And from that power, he literally has the confidence of a lion. Just by staring at you, his eyes turn into daggers, and a single frown from this legend would be like on the other end of a nuclear explosion. Unlike some of the other villains, Tywin has better dynamics with other characters given that he isn't flat out crazy. Joffrey and Ramsay are great on their own, but generally they close themselves off from getting too close to anyone. Tywin, on the other hand, is a father and he has to control his children, and that brings out a lot of good dynamics, and the best one is definitely Tyrion. His hatred towards Tyrion slowly gets more and more detailed until it explodes in season 4 with an ultimate showdown between them. This makes all of their interactions engaging as hell, and that is just one dynamic out of a handful. Tywin is bae, and it saddens me when I see lists yeeting Tywin out of the top 10 and even 20. Number 1. Tyrion Lannister. If you watch my videos, this shouldn't be that surprising because generally I gush about how much I like him in season 1 through 4. Now, if I was including the entire show, then I don't even know if Tyrion would make it onto my list from how terribly stupid he became. But hey, we're not looking at the bad, baby. We gotta give our main characters a chance so characters exclusive to the first few seasons don't sweep the entire list. Tyrion is the perfect storm of a character. He's funny, smart, brave, charismatic, and despite having some of these seemingly perfect characteristics, he still deals with a lot of conflict in that he's always looked down on for being a dwarf. He's constantly fighting a never-ending uphill battle, and this endless chain of conflict makes us love him. We get attached to characters who are constantly at odds and are still able to come out on top. In large part, this is a thank you to him being a Lannister, and that title also gives him a massive confidence boost. In scenes where most people would be scared, he's still wittily talking his way out of dangerous scenarios. The ability to use your words as a form of conflict resolution is refreshing in a world where so much conflict is resolved with the swing of a sword. Tyrion doesn't need one, and that aspect makes him courageous. Seeing him in any scene where he's being challenged instantly makes it entertaining because we are dying to see how he outsmarts his opponents. And even when everyone is against him, he is still able to find a way to come out on top, like his outstanding trial by combat speech. I'm trying not to exceed that big of a time limit for each of these rankings, but I could honestly go on for a while about why Tyrion is the best. Maybe I should just make it its own video at this rate. Overall though, his journey throughout King's Landing is utterly riveting, and to me, he's the most charming and likable character that I love to watch. Any scene with Tyrion is amazing. I would go into honorable mentions to argue why I didn't put some characters on this list, like Theon and Sansa being two big ones, but I think I'll delegate that discussion to a pinned comment in the comment section. So if you're curious, you can look into that so you don't have to sit through 5 minutes of me defending myself. Regardless though, thank you for watching and let me know who your favorite characters are down below.